Hello all, I wanted to do another quick video on the grooming gangs report, and this is because I believe this issue is absolutely massive. It's massive in and of itself, but I think it's even bigger for what it represents for British politics and the way things are headed for the country in the future. I think this is really, really important stuff, which is dictating perhaps the next 5 years of what our politics will be. Now, I said in the prior video before Casey's report came out that they were going to give something this time, because it was quite clear that they couldn't keep obfuscating and kicking the ball into the long grass. And we've seen with Keir Starmer, he's turned on everything. Immigration concern is no longer far right and so on. It's part of a clear strategy on his part, or at least whoever his controllers are, on their part, to try and win back the public, because they are seriously concerned about losing the public in various ways. So, first of all, let's just deal with some of the questions about the report that people have raised. I mean, perhaps the biggest critique you could make of it is they've still ignored the scale. I think they do know the scale, really. They just don't want to admit it still, because it could see the country in flames. But the real takeaway is that I think it was 2/3 of ethnicities of grooming gangs wasn't recorded. Surprise, surprise. Now, why that's important is because it gives the Guardianistas the sort of plausible deniability. Well, we don't know 2/3 of them, so they're probably all white anyway, because we know toxic white males and how bad they are. So that will be their line. But they've kind of given us a little inkling of probably what the reality is with the Rotherham graph. Essentially, they were saying it's something like Muslims represent 4% of the country, and in Rotherham they were responsible for 64% of grooming gangs, or group-based child sexual exploitation, as I think it's called. But I know some people are saying, look, it's still not enough, or others are finally happy to see the system acknowledge it. But I am more in the latter camp, and not because I'm just happy to see them acknowledge it. It's not just that. What it is what the acknowledgement means psychologically for the liberal mind. That is what is so huge here. And I want to explain why, because this is absolutely massive in my view with regards to who we are as a people. I do think some people do deserve a word of credit. Tommy Robinson would be one. I know some people are very fond of him. I know some not on the right. But I do think he deserves credit for banging the drum on this issue. Same with many citizen journalists. Sam Ashworth-Hayes in The Telegraph, I think he's kept this issue alive. And of course, Rupert Lowe more latterly. I think they've all been vindicated at long last. But the real question of this video is, why was it ignored? And we know on the surface it's because, well, people don't want to be called racist. That's a sort of simple explanation. But I think it runs a lot deeper than that. Again, on the channel, I speak a lot about underlying mythologies and how they define what a people are at a given time in culture. And one of the most poisonous things about liberal modernity is it really rips apart traditional understandings of life. It's really ironic because they say, oh, we love multiculturalism, we're so pro-Islam and all this sort of stuff. But when it comes to the traditional world, they're very anti it. That all has to go. You can have it as long as it's quiet and doesn't get in the way of the mainstream liberal mythology, and your church or your mosque or your synagogue or your temple essentially takes on the liberal ideology. So they'll promote Islam because it's universalist. They'll promote Christianity because it's universalist. They'll ignore what the tradition actually is. They'll just seek the bits in it that repeat the core of the liberal message. Now, of course, Christianity is universalist on the spiritual level, not on the physical. That's a video for another time. But it's a sleight of hand they use, and it's destroyed Christianity, especially the institutionalized version of it, which is a tragedy for Europe because we're losing our tradition, our mythology. What that has been replaced with is the liberal ideology. And that is something like basically everybody's exactly the same. And you might get minor, minuscule differences here and there, which are just quirks of fate. But the idea that certain groups act in certain ways is racist. That's just off the bat. And I first encountered this at a university. I mean, it was around before I was at university in the mid-2000s, but it was when I first saw it firsthand. I'm sure many of us have come across it in our working lives or academic lives or where else, media, for instance. And the presupposition, again, is that you have to answer any complicated question before you've even asked the question. So the point is, is knife crime a problem amongst young black youths? No, is already the answer. Before you've asked the question, you have to think no. You won't get funding unless the answer is no, and that's because it's the liberal ideology. It has to go back to everybody's the same. So the only explanation can be, oh, it's socio-economic issues, it's mainstream society is so racist, so on and so on and so on. And it's just working back to that. And this is exactly the same issue as the grooming gangs. The liberal mainstream, the academics, the politicians, the media, the police, they all function under that ideology. Of course, this isn't an issue to do with Pakistani Muslims. How dare you racist? It doesn't matter what the facts are. It doesn't matter what's really happening. What matters is the ideology, because the ideology is the mythology of the age, and that proves you're a moral person. And this is why this issue is almost useless to have debates on it when it comes to left-right at the moment, because we have to understand it's not about, you can just kick the ball into the long grass when it becomes about the facts. What it's about is the moral suppositions about what Britain is and the world. And if you subscribe to the liberal left ideology, it's not just the ideology that everybody's the same and you can't call out different groups for their behaviour because that's racist. The point is the informed morality. That's the key point. So it's saying you're a moral person if you deny the grooming gangs. Doesn't matter if you know the facts in and out. You're moral if you deny it, and you're immoral if you say there's a problem. Because again, you're sinning against the core liberal line, which is everybody's the same, which is almost like showing that you're an unenlightened, idiotic bigot. Of course, it helps for the liberal cause that they're largely middle class, upper middle class, out in the shires, and a lot of the people involved in the early days of sounding the alarm on the grooming gangs were working class. So there's a class element to it, I think, as well, of like, ignore these bigots, they're just stupid, that sort of thing. And this is why I think this is such a big watershed moment in reality, because what's really going on here, it's not just an acknowledgement that, yes, there has been a cover-up, that, yes, there is an issue here, and yes, the government, the media, the police, the academic world, they've all been gaslighting you, as you suspected, for 10 to 15 years, if not longer, and they've all called you racist and evil, and they've all been lying. Now, that's huge in and of itself, but what's even bigger is the Labour Party and the powers that be have been forced to move their own psychological model. That's huge, because that's the real shift. By the Labour Party acknowledging this, we've seen it on Sky News, we've seen it on the BBC, giving a sympathetic ear to victims. They haven't done this for 15 years. And this is a sign that the liberal overlords are having to shift their psychology away from these things can't happen because everybody's equal, which is a sort of liberal naivety. And as I said before, if you're 18 or you're a bit slow or you're just a bit naive, fine, this is life. You just want to believe the world is a Disney movie. But many people have bought into that ideology as a way to almost look down on others. That's the irony, I guess you could say, of wokeness. It's supposed to be about equality and so on, but really, once you understand it, it's just a way for people to feel elite and look down on you as a moral lesser. And this is exactly a perfect model with the grooming gangs. Now, it's been interesting seeing how that mainstream have adopted this new psychological model. Casey herself gave an interview, Baroness Casey, I think it was on Sky, and she was still basically holding to the line that, well, yeah, this has been this cover-up, and yeah, people have been right to be concerned, but we should remember the EDL is still really bad actors. We're the good people, the moral people who are now acknowledging this. And you think, well, you're kind of lying again, because it's hard to say the people that were out on the streets protesting about it were just bad. I mean, I'm sure there are bad apples amongst them, but the point is they clearly had an issue and you were ignoring them. And it's hard not to say they're all evil and, you're the good ones when you're the ones that have been covering it up. When I say you, I don't mean her literally, I mean the liberal establishment she represents. So, of course, you can see they're trying to almost maintain a lot of or protect some of their liberal presuppositions. The right-wing working class, right-wing, big quote marks there, because they're not actually right-wing. If you look at what someone like Tommy Robinson believes, he's pretty much a centrist, when it comes to his ideology. But anyway, the point is they're trying to maintain a bit of their ideology to soften the blow for the mainstream liberals, which is the dominant ideology of the age. But the core point I'm making here is why they've done this is they must recognise they're losing the country. They must have recognised it now. They must be seriously worried that people across the country are on edge in various ways. The obvious one is that the Uni Party are just frightened they're going to lose votes to Reform and other places, whoever else might crop up. So I think that's the obvious point, number one. But number two, I think they're really worried about civil disobedience. And again, I'm not condoning that, not promoting it. I think they're really worried about that because we've seen it exploding already, and they can tell that people are just dropping off the edge in our system now. How many people do you speak to in your daily life who just feel like, I just don't feel that I have an inheritance in my country anymore? I just don't feel the regime has any care for me at all. I think it almost actively despises me. And I'm sort of wondering, what am I even doing here? And I've had that conversation multiple times. I said it the other day. A plumber came over because I had an issue with my boiler. And he, after 2 minutes, just started talking about the state of the country. And I thought, this is so symbolic of what's going on in modern Britain. You know, people are on the edge. They're sick and tired. And this plumber, honest bloke, works hard, 4 kids at home, saying, I'm struggling to provide for them all. And I'm working, 10, 11 hours a day, just job to job to job to try and make ends meet. And I feel forgotten. And of course, I'm sure the mainstream would call him a disgusting, toxic, white male racist. This is exactly the sort of person the Labour Party should be courting. But instead, they've turned their back on such people. Now, I think what we're seeing is a shift back to try and win these people back. And this is the really big question because, number one, this is the first time in my life I've seen the Liberal system actually buckle, admit that it was wrong, and change course. Which again, it's like that scene in Predator where it shows pain and someone says to Arnie, what does this mean? And he says, that we can kill it, And it's almost that in display here. It shows this thing can be hurt, and it shows this thing isn't insurmountable. It can be influenced, and I think it is starting to crack. I know that's not going to stop the Owen Joneses. They will find something, they'll riff on this, 2/3 of the ethnicity hasn't been recorded, and they're probably all whites, and I'm sure they'll hammer that line. There'll be a lot of cope on the sort of hard left. They'll never accept it because, again, they view themselves as more moral than you because they believe in this sort of universalist equality, which, again, is no logic to it. It's just a madness of the liberal ideology. And then they'll critique the supposed fairy stories of the religious, the spiritual, the traditional types. But hey-ho, another video there, I guess. But I think, again, those leftists are going to have to eat humble pie when a real report comes out, because they can't hide from this any longer. And again, I do think when a proper national inquiry comes out, yeah, I still think they're going to obfuscate a lot. I still don't think they're going to cover the full scale. I still don't think they're going to go into some of the brutality of it. But I do think it is just basically going to say, yes, there has been a massive problem here. They're going to acknowledge it. And it is just going to blow up the argument. But by then, I dare say the Liberals will have integrated it and tried to move on. And this is the core point of the video. The system, in my view, with all of this, what it's really about is it's trying to wrestle back control. It realises it's lost the argument and it's lost the public. It's certainly lost the right wing, but it's lost the centrists, and it's also, perhaps most importantly, lost the working class who the Labour Party need. Because they've essentially said, you just don't matter. You're irrelevant. Your children, they're worth sacrificing to these gangs in order for our liberal, wonderful liberal upper middle class ideal to remain real. And of course, it's not real. It's a fantasy of Hollywood, liberal America. It's not real. But they have to think it is for their own psychological balance. So again, this is the one to watch. Why are they doing this? Well, it's because they want to continue things as normal, in my view. The overarching globalist plan is essentially to make people in Western nations minorities in their own country. Then they can't fight back. They have no majority. They can't say what they want. At that point, it's total domination by the globalist elite. On the street level, we'll just have skirmishes between different groups, different traditions, and you'll all be called racist because they're so above you and so superior and ignore you. And then they'll be able to do it. So I think they're trying to win back just enough people to maintain things for the next 10, 15, 20 years until we're at the critical mass and the end game of globalization can't be ignored. That's the indigenous people being swamped. That means you have no political power or purchase anymore, and it's game over. So what I'm saying is, and I think hopefully you're on board with me already, which is don't trust them. Don't trust them 1 inch. They're going to try and play to you. They're really going to try and charm you now. Classic sales 101. I've worked in sales offices. I wasn't necessarily a sales guy myself, but I worked around lots of them. And sales 101 was always, you have to make the person that you're selling to think that they're gaining, even when they're not. And this is what I think they're doing here. Giving you a massive concession. Yes, the grooming gangs is true. Yes, immigration is out of control. Yes, it's making us an island of strangers. You are right. But they don't care about these issues, really. Remember, if they could, they would shut you up, call you racist, and throw you in jail for this. They do not care. What they care about is power, their own ideology. And they will happily live in their own la-la land of liberal ideology, this wonderful, beautiful multicultural ideal they have, while they ignore it, but you have to deal with it. And if you complain, they would happily shut you up, throw you in jail, whatever, to keep you quiet. They can't do that anymore because they've realised too many people know what's going on, so they're having to change tack. That's my belief. Be interested to hear what you think down below. I wouldn't trust them an inch, and we have to stay very hard on not trusting them. And remember the two big ones of our era. Number one, is anything they're doing going to change the dispossession of Europeans having control of their own continent in Europe? And number two, are we actively allowed our own tradition and identity? The answer to that is always no when you break it down, and that's why they must be opposed. As always, these are my thoughts. Do let me know what you think down below. Do consider subscribing to the channel if you're new, and do enjoy the rest of your day.